Check one, check two. Can you hear me? Maybe I should have tested this first. Check one, check two. All right, we're live. Hello and welcome to week 4. Oh my God, we finally made it. Almost a month in here. You are all doing great, especially in the wake of some of the technical difficulties we've had so far. So actually, let's just start there. Let's start with with some logistics, and then I'll dive into other things. Again, for those of you just watching, this is going to be my weekly recap and weekly introduction. So we'll summarize some of the big ideas from week 3, and then we'll dive into what I hope you will learn from week 4. So I'm actually going to start by sharing my screen here, and then we'll dive into some of the specifics. All right, so long story short, everything should be up and working within the campus platform. This includes both the labs as well as the discussion forums. So I'll actually bring up the week 4 discussion forums first. So what you'll need to know is that every week we'll have discussion forums that should be organized something like this. We will have a lounge. The lounge is where we can have post whatever you want, questions, ideas, topics, memes. I will also be posting kind of my weekly recaps and introductions there as well. We'll also have the live session thread. This will be if you have questions about any of the labs or topics, you can drop them in there and I'll cover them during our live session. I'll also post my live session recap there. I'll also post any kind of links to the recording as well as kind of navigation for how to watch or join the live session if you can. Besides these two, which are going to be our kind of logistical forums, we'll also have one to, I guess in this case, 3 forums or topics within the weekly forum as well. So you can see for week 4, would love kind of get your thoughts on structured data, as well as the benefits and limitations of relational databases, focus on the limitations like NoSQL databases, why do they exist, and finally, actually solving real world problems using SQL. Again, the forums are technically optional, but I'd love to kind of see the engagement, and Karen and myself are going to be heavily engaged in the forums. Same thing with the live session attendance. It's technically optional as well, but at the very least, please watch the recording and try and join if you can. Last week it was, I mean, I can present and talk to just Karen, but it's going to be much more engaging if there is a few students on the bridge. Friendly reminder, I'll post the live session information in this thread, but you can always scroll down on the left, go down to live session, and over here you'll see the information for the upcoming sessions, which should hopefully be automatically updated to your time zone, as well as the cloud recordings where you can watch our last 3. So for example, if you want to catch Monday's session, you should be able to click on kind of the first, not 10:01. We need, yeah, 10:20. I think it's this one. Cool. So if I click on this, this should hopefully send me to the recording from, yep, October 20th. So hello, hello. And yeah, it's only an hour, so double speed it and you can kind of catch up and everything. Again, for each live session, we'll be running through the labs for each week. For module 4, there's a couple kind of questions around the kind of labs for the first few media sets. Technically, you can just click through them. So for example, let me pull up something in 4.3. Boop, boop, boop. Next. And let's do next. So if I click into one of these activities here, you'll notice that it's not going to actually render a lab. It's just going to be a walkthrough. So you don't have to actually download or run anything. I know Karen provided some information on how to do that, but you should at least click through and kind of read and understand exactly kind of what's going on. We'll get a hands-on practice with SQL in week 4, starting in, I think, 4.7. You can also see if you go down to the very bottom, these are going to be the modules with executable labs. So we'll actually show what that looked like for week 3 since we just wrapped week 3 up. If I go into 3.5 here, and maybe not 3.5, let's do, yeah, with 3.5 is like an optional session. You don't actually have to use Watson Studio if you don't want to, but I hope I do recommend it as we're in the IBM class here. Just getting some hands-on experience with IBM Cloud. But yeah, let's go to like 3.2, for example. Here we go. So if I click on this, this will actually open up and run the lab inside of our class environment. As always, if you need to, you can grab the labs from my GitHub. Should be up in here. And again, these notebooks I will try and run and execute each week. I haven't uploaded module 4 yet, but you'll see for week 3, we have kind of the labs I ran in the live session. Feel free to open those up in Google Colab or review them on your own time. And then you can see I ran through the labs in 3.2 and 3.4 during the live session. So you can expect something similar for week 4. If you show up to the live session, we'll run through the lab code that'll be in 4.7 and through the end, where we'll be using Python, SQLite, SQL Alchemy to start ingesting and reading in SQL data into pandas, and then kind of doing hashtag data science on it. Cool. So long story short, logistic wise, everything should be up and running. I would love to see participation in the discussion forums each week. Try and join the live sessions each week. Try and react, thumbs up, emoji, comment if you can on any of our discussion forums or videos. Again, just would love to see the engagement from you all as you kind of put your own time into the class. All right, so that's a good segue into what I want to cover for week 3. Big ideas from week 3 to take away. The purpose of week 3 was to introduce ways of ingesting data into our notebooks, into our ecosystem to perform data science and modeling on it. So some of the big ideas of bringing in data from week 3 include web scraping, APIs, and then in the live session, if you watch the video, I also talked about FTP servers. So again, the idea here is you have some questions, you have a business use case, but you don't necessarily have the data readily available to analyze. Instead, we need to go access our data vendor, bring that data in, do our extract, transform, load, clean up, and then create that data product. Web scraping we talked about is how to extract data from markup language files. So typically HTML or XML. You'll see this by, let's say you want to go and pull a table off of the internet. I think in this example, we pulled like revenue data for GameStop, things like that. And since it's loaded as a web page, we need to extract just the table we need. Note that web scraping is typically fragile and not recommended. And most web hosting sites do not actually recommend or want you to scrape their data. In the live session, we talked about Twitter and Reddit and how because of the vast amount of botting to scrape data from them, they implemented difficult barriers to web scraping. Web scraping is also typically against the terms of service of most websites. So instead of web scraping, especially against HTML pages, we typically are going to be using APIs. APIs are going to be application programming interfaces that a data vendor kind of owns, operates, and supports. And typically that's how they sell or provide data to you. So the example we did here was with Yahoo Finance. The Y Finance Python library is actually running an API behind the scenes. We make a call to this API, return data that's typically in JSON, parse that JSON, and then store it however we need to. We introduced a couple pandas functions for this. Pandas read HTML, read XML, read JSON. And then finally, just for completeness during the live session, I talked about FTP servers. They're kind of a legacy system, but this is also how some data vendors supply structured files, so such as CSVs, Excel files, tab separated files, what have you. And it's got some cybersecurity risks today, but you may still see them, especially with older legacy vendors. So just for also completeness here, if you look at the like pandas like read, let's do XML function. What I like to show is that like, hey, not only can we read XML, you can also read Excel, read CSV, read table, read HTML, read HDF, right? There's a lot of different read parquet, read SQL, which is going to be applicable to week 4. There's lots of shortcuts and ways to start taking data from these raw data sources and put them into a pandas data frame. We'll actually get more in depth with pandas in week 5 when we get into using Python for data analytics. But we've done a little bit of pandas already in the last couple of weeks. So other big ideas from week 3, in addition to bringing data from different disparate data sources, we then performed some basic analytics, right? So not only did we read data in from an HTML as well as an API, we joined the data sets together, we made visualizations, we did some basic cleaning, we worked on aligning our data types, right? So all of this work to try and clean up our data and then make some kind of action from it, right? Which stock should we invest in given all this information and these visualizations that we have created. I added some links that I talked about during the live session, so you can go back and review that on your own. Cool. So if week 1 was about thinking like a data scientist, week 2 was thinking like a data programmer, week 3 is data acquisition. What are we doing in week 4, right? So with week 4, we're doing our introduction to databases, specifically relational databases. Databases are a pivotal data concept that has existed for at least the last 50 years. Relational databases go all the way back to the 1970s when we start talking about Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle databases, all these old legacy systems that are still widely used today. So in Module 4, you'll learn about why databases, especially relational databases, are so useful. You'll be introduced to the SQL or structured querying language syntax, and we'll be creating our own databases, executing SQL commands on them. And then, of course, if you haven't already connected the dots, a database is just going to be another data source. So we'll talk about how we can read data from databases into pandas, create our data frame so we can start executing code and making those visualizations. And we'll also talk in the live session about switching that around, right? So instead of just reading data and doing data science, what about data engineering? Data engineering is where we take data from APIs, our web scraping, our FTP servers, and then save that to a database. So we're writing data to a relational database for an engineer or data scientist or machine learning engineer down the line to extract. So that's going to be called data engineering and ETL pipelines, which goes hand in hand with what we do as data scientists, where we take data and tell that story and make that business decision. I think that's all I got for this week. Let me know if you have any questions or issues as you start working through the media sets around learning and executing SQL code and Python code and reading and interacting with the databases. Remember to try and use the in-campus cloud notebook environment as much as possible. And I'll put in a comment into one of our threads when I upload the notebooks to my GitHub for week 4. Cool. I will see you all on the other side. Look at me keeping it short and sweet this week. Oh, last thing. For those of you following along with the extra credit assignments, there's 2 this week for Kaggle, just because I want you to know as much SQL as you can. The actual one that lines up with week 4 is Intro to SQL. Intro to SQL will actually spin up a data warehouse, which is slightly different than a database or relational database, on Google Cloud called BigQuery, and then we'll be executing the same kind of commands that you should be familiar with after week 4 against that environment. Only takes an hour or 2. I think I whizzed through this when I did this exercise. And again, more hands-on experience, more certificates, more experience kind of working with these systems. So just for reminder, intro to programming and intro to Python kind of line up with what I want you to know from weeks 2 to weeks 3. Intro to SQL is going to line up with week 4. Pandas is technically, I want you to learn this as quickly as you can, but this is going to line up pretty well with week 5. And then we also have this advanced SQL mini lecture as well, which technically doesn't assign to a specific week, but feel free to knock it out now as well, because it's pretty fun. It gives you kind of a more advanced look at things you can do with data warehouses specifically. Expect in my live session, I'll talk about lake houses, warehouses, and databases and cloud-based data systems. So again, try and join the live session if you are able. All right, I think that's what I have. So I will see you in the discussion forums for week 4. And I will post this video inside the week 4 lounge. If you're not on week 4 yet, don't worry, you're doing great. Wrap up week 3 as soon as you can. Focus on the assessment quizzes. Reach out if you have questions about any of the quiz questions. And I'll see you in person on Monday and online every other day between then. Have a great night, have a great weekend, and great job so far on all the work you're putting into this class. I appreciate you. All right, have a good one.